Hey everybody, what's going on? Wow, 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 wow. Okay. We are revving our engines. We're ready to go to discuss another chapter or two of Mad Max like we do. And let me get this up to speed real quick. Let's get the whole screen. Let's get the whole thing, the whole bada bing, the whole ring, ting, ding. All right. We got some filler chapters last episode, and let's hope that it's not the same this episode, right? Chapter 19. Bubba and Mudguts moved surprisingly fast once they were certain they could not be seen. They reached the forest less than 10 minutes behind Jesse. The Toecutter, they're stalking May's farm, and they're off to harass Jesse, but they're not to kill her. They're just harassing her. They want to get her really scared before she confronts the Toecutter. At least that's the master plan. But, you know, as we know, master plans don't always work out. She was sauntering along, her spirits high, stopping from time to time to look at the huge trees and to pick wildflowers here and there. She was following a lazy, overgrown trail that wound down from the homestead to the lake, which had once provided an endless source of fresh water for the surrounding farms. The fields had last been tilled generations ago, but the beach round the lake remained virtually unchanged from the day when the children of the surrounding farms had first gathered there to play and swim through the summer. So that's amazing. So in the movie, we have a beach. She just goes to a beach. But here we have this whole backstory about a lake. It's actually a lake beach, and that children used to play. I mean, these are the details that I love. Once in the forest, Bubba and Mudguts moved with more confidence. More at home in the deep shadows cast by the trees, they found it easy going through the wide clearings beneath the massive, overhanging boughs. Dressed in their black leather, they would have presented no more than a fleeting impression to anybody who saw them. They headed at an angle through the forest, moving towards the point where Jessie had entered, trying to estimate how far she would have gone. After 15 minutes or so, they began to stop and listen, searching the air for any sound which would give them a clue. They needn't had wasted their efforts. As it happened, they almost stumbled on top of her. Only the sharp sight of Bubba Zanetti, who caught a flash of a red towel through the trees, stopped them from running right in front of her. That's interesting, man. What an interesting detail to write. How do we go from really cool chapters to really like bloated chapters in this thing? Because this is great. The sight of the red towel, that's not, I can't imagine that was in the script. That's got to be a Terry detail, and that was a good one. Bubba grabbed Mudguts by the shoulder and pulled him behind a tree trunk. Together, flattened against it, they peered round the edge until they picked her up less than 15 yards away and coming more or less towards them. Sorry, that they managed to pick out the trail and saw, with relief, that it veered away before she would reach them. For the first time since the store, they saw her at close range. She was wearing a skimpy t-shirt, her nipples plainly visible through it, a bikini bottom, and a pair of sandals. That is such like late 70s, early 80s aesthetic. I can picture that so perfectly. In her hand, she carried a book and a packet of cigarettes. They stood stock still until she passed them and silently watched her backside wobbling out of sight. It was easy for them now. All they had to do was follow. You know what's amazing? We see this in the movie. We see Jesse walking down to the beach. We do not see the stalking. I wonder if that was something that George Miller just didn't get around to shooting. He just wasn't able to. That's really interesting. It would have made that scene more interesting, but it's also kind of like the calm before the finally, you know, the problem with Mad Max. Here's the problem with Mad Max. I realize it now. I realize it right now as I'm saying this. The first act and the second act are fully developed and, you know, well portrayed on the screen. The third act is truncated to like 10 minutes. That's really what happens, because the climax of the movie, or at least the climax, or I should say that the end of Act 2 is when both Jesse and Sprague are run down, right, by the gang, which would mean that that's the point of no return if you're going by 3-act structure, which means that the third act begins with Max deciding to finally take revenge, which is what Mad Max is supposed to be all about in the first place. But it's really only in like the last 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. So the movie, the third act, is really condensed to the final, and the movie's only like 85 minutes long. So it's amazing how we get this long winding buildup, and we know obviously why that was. They didn't get a chance to film a large percentage of the chase scenes that were meant for the end. The movie is not a complete movie. But I'm seeing now in reading this that perhaps there was supposed, the stalking and I don't know, it just makes you realize where things are in that sort of in that act structure, and why the movie is sort of hobbled by it a little bit. Doesn't take away from the greatness of the movie by any means, but that's the reality. They held a hurried conference and then set off at a fast walk, standing about 10 yards to one side of the path and being careful not to give themselves away by snapping the underbrush. They caught up. And again, this is something that is not fun to read as much as it is fun to see. Like, this would have been great to see visually, but to read the description, it's not as interesting. But still a better chapter than the last chapters we read. They caught up with her again within sight of the lake. Mudgut stopped, waiting by a tree just a few yards off the track, while Bubba set off after her at a run. He moved deeper into the forest, guessing the direction of the path until he was certain he was in front of her. He turned and saw the track winding through the straggling edge of the forest. The lake, in all its sparkling glory, was laid out through the trees, but he didn't spare it at a glance. He paralleled the path for another 10 or 15 yards, moving away from Jesse until he found the straight stretch that he was looking for, then moved behind a tree on its edge. Hardly daring to breathe, he waited, the corner of his head barely visible round the trunk. Then he saw her, walking at an easy pace, swinging the towel in her hand and gently singing to herself. He stepped out, legs astride, hands in his pockets, and a leer on his face. One other detail, it's quite possible, too, that perhaps, again, this is George Miller's first film. It's also quite possible that maybe he just cut it. Maybe he thought, in the philosophy of less is more. We don't need to see this. Instead, we need to see that the dog is killed and whatnot. And then we just see her terror at the intangible, because she's running through the woods and she's not sure what's stalking her, but she can tell that they're stalking her. I mean, you see them kind of stalking her, but it's not from their point of view. It's from her point of view. And perhaps Miller thought that her point of view would have been better for that. So who knows? He stepped out, legs astride, hands in his pockets, and a leer on his face. When she saw him so unexpectedly standing there, barely 10 yards in front, for a second, she felt no fear. A wave of nothing more than confusion swept over her. She quite literally couldn't believe her eyes. Her racing mind tried to provide some explanation for his presence. That is a really well-written description of what happens. Like, I experience that all the time. When you see somebody who you haven't seen for like 10 years or something, 15 years, you haven't thought about them, you haven't seen them, and then you see them suddenly, and your brain is almost, it takes your brain about 10 seconds, which for your brain, if you think about how quickly you make snap decisions, how fast, in microseconds, for your brain to take 10 seconds trying to identify a face that but you can't place where you know them from, it's a long time. And I don't know. I totally relate to that. She's trying to, her brain is trying to process what she's seeing, because there's no possible reason why. And you know why I wish that this was in the movie? Because, I love Bubba Zanetti. I love Jeffrey, what's his face? I don't know his full name. The actor is great in Bubba Zanetti as that role. And it just would have given Bubba more screen time. So we don't get enough Bubba in Mad Max. Bubba is a cult favorite. Everybody loves Bubba Zanetti, but we don't get enough of him. We just don't get enough of him. Her racing mind tried to provide some explanation for his presence. When she realized that this man really was blocking her way, the first gasp of panic hit her. She recognized him. She stared. In seconds, horror came in mounting waves. That is, see, that is man, Terry, you fucking do it, Terry. That's great. He didn't move. He just stood there grinning at her. Her mind, overwhelmed by the waves of panic, demanded that she do something, but nothing more than instinct. She dropped her towel, book, and cigarettes, turned on her heel, and began to run up the path. So she never gets she never gets to sunbathe for the last day. I mean, that's like the last day of her life, and she gets to go to have some solitary time at the beach, and she does not get it. Actually, it's not. She does survive She does survive getting run over in the movie, but she's soon to pass, and they're going to donate her organs to she's going to become an organ donor. Her feet were flailing the ground, her sandals rapping out a sharp, regular beat on the earth as she fled towards the homestead. Her heart was pounding, tears of fright streaming down her face when she saw Mudguts. He, too, suddenly materialized from behind a tree. A wild, piercing yell escaped her lips. She stopped, then turned widely off the path and began to crash through the trees. At the house, Max thought that he heard something. He dropped his wrench and concentrated all his senses on the forest. The second high-pitched scream reached his ears clearly. Without a moment's hesitation, he ran to the front door of the van, reached for the short-barreled shotgun, grabbed a cartridge belt, and sprinted towards the forest. Amongst the trees, Mudguts and Bubba were herding Jessie away from the path, forcing her towards the house, but making sure she would emerge from the forest too far away to reach its safety without them. They shadowed her with all their craft of experienced bushmen, emerging from the shadows to cut her off, leaving her no alternative but to go where they wanted. She was gasping for breath and had none to spare for the screams. Her forehead was on fire. The pain sliced through her chest as her protesting lungs demanded more oxygen, but she kept going, starting at the sight of one of the grinning bikies, seeing things now where there was nothing, fearing every shadow. By the time Max reached the forest, they had Jessie totally confused. All she could do was stumble, run, and force her protesting body away from them. Max slotted 2 cartridges into the breech as he hit the forest. He yelled wildly for Jessie, but the blood was beating a tattoo in her ears and she heard nothing. That's interesting. Beating a tattoo in her ears. She heard nothing. Like her blood pressure is so high and pounding so rapidly that she can't hear. Blindly, she careered on. Finally, she saw the paddocks through the trees. It gave her renewed strength. With a speed she never knew she possessed, she bolted through the thinning bush, out into the open paddock and up the slope to the house. Mudguts and Bubba, still coming up behind, weren't trying to catch her. They were flushing her out for the Toecutter, who was with Diabondo and Johnny the Boy, and was moving in from the rear of the house for the kill. So like Toecutter said, he's like, scare her, bring her to me, and then I'm gonna take it from there. Max, still running, was so it seems that the large oaf, the guy, whatever whoever he was, the big lummox of a guy, he's not even in the book. He's a character that was put in the movie. Now we have no explanation of his history at all. Max, still running, was only halfway to the lake when Jessie was struggling up the hill, gasping for breath, and the Toecutter was approaching Sprague, asleep on his blanket in the shade at the back of the house. May, whose hearing was a casualty of her age, dozed in her chair in the living room. She heard nothing as the Toecutter picked up the drowsy child and, cradling him in his hands, carried him out to the corner of the house, out of the sight of the paddock. Diabondo and Johnny the Boy stood beside him, smiles playing across their faces at the sight of Mudguts and Bubba sweating and puffing up the hill. Jessie heard their labored breath, pounding boots. She used her remaining strength to throw herself towards the veranda, and the Toecutter emerged from the shadow. "Excuse me," he said in mock politeness. "I think this may be your child." So this is staged very differently in the movie. Jesse runs up, and they're all like by a farmhouse or whatever, and they already have Sprague, and they're asking for Kundalini's hand back. This is different. And in fact, I think this might be better than the movie, the way that this is done in the book. Jessie stopped dead in her tracks, a look of sheer horror distorting her features, and a new frenzy of panic seizing her in her heart. She began summoning the strength to scream, stretching out her arms in an instinctive gesture for her child. Before a sound broke through her lips, the Toecutter began to speak in a low voice. "Just be quiet, lady," he said, walking towards her, "or I'll match every scream of yours with one from the kid." Jessie strangled the protest on her lips, staring at her child, silently imploring the Toecutter to return him. The Toecutter walked towards her. Johnny the boy and Diabando appeared around the corner of the house, flanking him on either side, blocking her way into the house. Bubba and Mudguts, flushed and tired after their exertions, stood panting behind her. "My baby! Please give me back my baby!" she whimpered. The Toecutter ignored her and turned to Johnny. "Go and get Clunk and bring the bikes down here. Bubba, go with him. Mudguts, take the gun and keep a watch out for the outraged father." Mudguts caught the shotgun as it sailed through the air. Johnny and Bubba set off in a looping run to help Clunk ferry the bikes down to the house. Like, did we need that next piece? Like, he said it in the dialogue. We don't need a description of them, of knowing that they did what the Toecutter said. It's just not necessary. "Please give him back. He's only a child," Jessie said. The Toecutter turned towards her. "Come here, Jessie." He watched with satisfaction as astonishment spread across her face at hearing her name. She didn't move. "Come here, I said, or I'll have to accidentally drop the kid on his head." Jessie walked a couple of paces towards him. "Closer," he ordered. As she got within a yard or so of him, he suddenly called out, "Diabando," and threw the child 7 yards through the air. What? Diabando's reactions weren't quick, but he managed to catch Sprague before he hit the ground. Jesus fucking Christ. As a father, that makes my heart friggin' palpitate. Holy shit. And of course, they could, George Miller on his first movie with $300,000. He's not going to try and film that. He's not that. Now he simplified the scene is what they did. He probably wrote that in the script and then simplified the scene. The Toecutter ignored the child and turned to Jessie. He looked her up and down for several seconds. She felt her flesh begin to crawl beneath his gaze. Deliberately, he pulled off his riding gloves and stuffed them in the breast of his jacket. Without taking his eyes off her, he said, "One word, one cry from you, and I'll tell Diabando to dash that kid's head against the wall over there. You'd like that, wouldn't you, Diabando?" Diabando grunted a reply and grinned. "Do you understand?" the Toecutter asked Jessie. She nodded her head. He ran his eyes over her once more. "Good. We're going to get on just fine." Slowly, he reached out with his right hand and clamped his fingers around her nipple, squeezing it tight. He pulled her towards him until she was standing almost toe to toe with him. You never want to stand toe to toe with the Toecutter. She felt a shudder of shame and revulsion rattle through her body, but for the sake of Sprague, she didn't say a word. His eyes were boring into her, his fingers squeezing tighter when his lieutenants arrived with 3 bikes. See, that's all you needed, because we already got, he says, "Hey, go get the bikes." You don't need that next paragraph where they literally ran to get the bikes. You just cut. The next thing you need to see is this. They come with the bikes. That makes more sense. Park them and set off for the others. She could feel the tentacles of pain spreading across her chest and tears forming at the corner of her eyes. "You hurt me once, lady. Do you remember that? You put your knee into my balls. Do you remember?" He gave her nipple a vicious twist. If this wasn't what... That's a great sentence to read any other way. Like, not in this context and not in this book, but that sentence, "He gave her nipple a vicious twist," is a great sentence. Not in this context, though, but to read that in this context is crazy, to say the least. "He gave her nipple a vicious twist." A gasp of pain escaped her clenched teeth. He held his grip, enjoying the agony on her face, then relaxed a little so she could concentrate on what he was saying. "You could have injured me for life. But now it's your turn, isn't it? That's fair, don't you think? Jesse didn't say a word, and his free hand shot out and grabbed the whole of her other breast. He squeezed and turned, stretching the skin beneath the cotton t-shirt and threatening to bust the tiny blood vessels under her skin. Answer me. No, she moaned. No, it's not fair. I thought you were going to harm us. The Toecutter laughed. Oh, you can be sure of that now. He looked straight at her, slowly releasing his hold. You know your trouble, Jesse. You've got no sense of humor, but then, I suppose with a pretty face like that, you don't need a sense of humor. The only trouble is, if you happen to lose that pretty face, well, you've got nothing, have you? Jesse was spared answering by the arrival of Johnny, Clunk, and Bubba with the other 3 bikes. They dismounted eagerly, hoping they hadn't missed any of the fun, and only too willing to join in. His audience was complete. The Toecutter decided to get down to business. He let his hands drop from Jesse's breast, and she gave a sigh of relief, letting her shoulders drop and her muscles relax slightly. Immediately, he put both his hands at the bottom of her t-shirt, pulling it up towards him and tearing it sharply. The fabric stretched and ripped crookedly from the hem to the binding round her neck, exposing her red, scratched breasts to the grinning bikies. The Toecutter's laugh was cut short, mid-chuckle, by a voice behind it. Hold it, mister, or I'll blow your head off. Slowly, hold it, mister, or I'll blow your head off. Slowly, he turned around and saw May Swayze. What a name, May Swayze. He saw May Swayze standing at the corner of the veranda with a large, old-fashioned shotgun at her hip. Don't you turn any further and let go of the young lady's clothes if you don't mind, and you drop that gun. The Toecutter assessed the odds and decided that it wasn't worth it and let what was left of the t-shirt drop. You see that moment in the movie, that sentence I just said, the Toecutter assessed the odds and decided it wasn't worth it. That's why they know that they've got them cornered, but she can't shoot everybody. May can't shoot everybody, but she's going to shoot one of them. And so they all listen to what she says. And, Toecutter goes, I'm so scared. He does that whole thing. May turned her attention to Diabondo, still holding the whimpering Sprague. You with the kid. Put him on the ground, real slow. Diabondo obeyed. Jesse backed away from the Toecutter, and Sprague ran into her arms. Bubba Zanetti decided it had gone on long enough. He started to walk towards May, calling her bluff, when Jesse and Sprague backed towards the van. Listen, old lady. Just stand back or I'm going to have to shoot. Bubba kept walking, then stopped dead as the gun exploded. May's aim was terrible. The only pellets that hit Bubba were absorbed by his leather jacket and pants, but the blast had its effect. So Bubba gets shot by it sounds like birdshot, which can maim you, but not necessarily kill you. The bikies decided that she wouldn't be bluffed. As May ordered Jesse and Sprague to go to the van, Max, down at the beach, heard the shot and began to run for the house. Jesse started the motor. Jesse, start the motor. If any of the rest of you so much as move, I'll blow your heads off. Now back off there. Back off over near there with the water tank. The 6 of them obeyed slowly, shuffling their feet and fighting against the humiliation of being ordered around by the old woman. She kept them covered while sorry, I can't. My son is jumping up and down upstairs and I cannot. Hold on a second. You can hear a mouse fart in the attic from the basement in this house. So it's like anytime there's jumping up, he's probably listening to his Alexa and getting all hyped up or something. Where was I? Jesse, start the motor. And if any of the rest of you so much as move, I'll blow your heads off. Now back off over there next to the water tank. The 6 of them obeyed slowly, shuffling their feet and fighting against the humiliation of being ordered around by an old woman. She kept them covered while Jesse backed the van out, turned it around, and threw the passenger door open. As May got in, she gave them one last warning. If you try and follow, I'll blow you away. Don't forget it. She slammed the door. So we don't get to see Max. I'm sure we're going to see that in the next chapter, actually. She slammed the door, and with a squeal of rubber and a shower of dust, Jesse gunned the van down the dirt road. No sooner were they into the third than the bikies were running for their machines. The Toecutter cursing their stupidity and screaming that they would waste them before they reached the road. The Toecutter cursing their stupidity and screaming that they would waste them before they reached the road. Inside the van, Jesse was almost hysterical. Why didn't we keep them there? Oh, for God's sakes, May, they're going to catch us out here. At least we had the gun. We could have kept them at bay until Max came back. May came close to losing her temper. I had one shot left, Jesse, and you can see where my aim's like. It wouldn't have taken long for one of those larrikins. I love that word. One of those larrikins to make another run at me, and then we would have been done for. At least this way we would have gotten a chance. If you concentrate on driving and don't let them rattle you. But the other gun, May, the one they had. Oh, sure. And what makes you think it was loaded? Even if it was, then my aim would have been any better. Look, Jesse, it's over, and you just got to drive. Jesse wasn't listening anymore. She was staring in the rear vision mirror at the line of bikes, which had just left the homestead and was accelerating like the Furies towards the van. They're coming after us, she said in a flat, emotionless voice. They're coming after us. I never thought they wouldn't, May said calmly, I never thought they wouldn't, May said calmly, as Jesse strained to get every last drop of power out of the van. Max emerged from the forest and saw the bikes roar down the road. Panicking, he looked across the fields and gullies and caught sight of the van no more than a mile or two away. So we never get that scene where they're down by the river having a good time and Max talks about walking with his father and the shoes and everything. That was really, really, really good, like, insight, you know? It's a shame that, that sort of character development gives an impact when Jesse and Sprague are killed. Hiking along in a storm of dust, he felt for a second as if his bodily functions had ceased. His heart, his breathing, the very passage of blood through the tiniest of capillaries. It was panic in its most pure form. Oh, God, he wailed. The fuel line, Jesse, he screamed. The fuel line's not properly connected. The fuel line's not properly connected. His voice was lost on the countryside, but its sound galvanized him in action. The sound galvanized him in action. With an effort prompted by terror, he set off across the paddocks towards the point where the drive intersected the road. Although Jesse didn't know the cause, several seconds later, the van's engine began to die. They don't explain that in the movie. It's never explained why there's engine trouble. We see Max working on the engine and then the engine dies. But now we know why, because of the fuel line. One minute she was screaming down the road with the pistons thrashing furiously. The next, she was fighting for any power at all. The engine was sputtering as it sucked in the last of the fuel from the broken line. And though she tried again and again to refire the engine, the van rolled to a halt. Jesse! May screamed. The motor, it's dead. Get out then. They'll kill you here. Run for it. Go to the cross of the paddocks. Well, they have to chase you on foot. That's actually really fucking sad. Jesse stared in shock. May grabbed her by the shoulders, thrust Sprague into her hands, leant across and opened the door and pushed her onto the road. Run! Run, for God's sake! Jesse didn't know what she was doing. Reason had left her. Somehow she got her feet moving and found herself in front of the van, running with Sprague clinging to her arms. This is really fucking sad, actually. Like, this is so sad to me. May was already out, standing with the shotgun at her hip. I can picture this perfectly. The bikes, because we've seen the movie, the bikes tore down the road to meet her at such speed that she barely had time to think, let alone aim. She held the gun tight, standing upright with her legs slightly splayed, and pulled the trigger. The force of the explosion sent her reeling backwards, and she was lost in the dust and the smoke of the machines as they flared out to pass on either side of her in the van. If the blast had any effect, it certainly didn't show. The 6 riders, now 2 abreast, were still on their machines, bearing down with all the power at their disposal on mother and child. It was some sort of mercy that Max, running with the speed and energy of a man possessed, didn't see the Toecutter's front wheel catch his wife in the small of her back, or see the force of the impact wrench Sprague from her hands and throw him beneath the back of the wheel of Bubba's and Eddie's thundering cycle, or see Jessie tossed in the air like a rag doll, spinning back to earth to have her legs and abdomen crushed beneath Johnny the boy's screaming tires. By the time May reached them, they were both dead. The Toecutter and his men only stopped to open the gate leading out onto the quiet country road. Oh, fuck. What a chapter, man. Fuck me, man. Man, Terry can write. Oh, was that fucking... Oh, that like gave me palpitations just reading it. I can't. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Normally we do 2 chapters. That was a long one. We're gonna stop there because that was really good. I don't want to cheapen the emotional impact of Jesse and Sprague's death. It was really friggin' sad reading that, man. I'm kind of like, whew. What do you think? Do you like the way they did it in the book better than the way that they did the movie? I'm curious to know. Tune in next week or next time, whenever I do the next chapter, and we will see the fallout from this life-changing event for Max. As you know, the reason why, it's interesting. One final note: why, the world is not like the world is dystopian and society is crumbling, but society still exists. So, philosophically, Max's world ends when his family dies. The end of the world happens for Max far before it's truly the end of the world in The Road Warrior. And I think that's what's so profound. Like, even though Miller wanted Mad Max to be like, oh, it's like we have all these banged up cars and we have no money, so it's better that it's like the broken future, society is crumbling, we're on the cusp of what eventually will be the apocalypse, and then he just kept pushing that in the sequels. But the reality is like the metaphor, the symbolism of what the end of the world is for Max in the first movie is this moment that we just read, where his wife and child are killed, and it's the end of his world. It's literally the end of the world for him. And yeah, so Riot Stickers. Riot Stickers is the sponsor here at the Frumess channel, and we have a brand new deal. We're doing 200 die cut stickers for $69. A die cut sticker is a computer guided scalpel that cuts the sticker in any shape that you like. So you can have a custom shape. That's what die cut stickers are. You can get 200 of those bad boys. Those are expensive. That's an expensive sticker normally. So 200 for $69 at riotstickers.com/Frumess. That's a great deal. Link is down in the description. I'm going to play the video, and we will see you next time finding out the fallout of Max losing his family. Thank you.